Hi, today I am talking to Matt Cameron. Matt is a high school social studies teacher at Georgetown High School in Georgetown, Ohio. I am Jill Simpson, and I am a facilitator with PBLMatters in Ohio. Morning, Matt.
Morning.
I'd like to first talk about how we sort of met. Matt, I think, started your PBL journey with a book study.
Yes.
And which book study? That was PBL teaching practices,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
And so we sort of met virtually before we met in person through the book study.
Exactly.
And then I traveled to Georgetown and had the opportunity, and such a great opportunity, to start the first cohort of PBL teachers at Georgetown schools. So that was how he and I met. Matt has a great project I want to share with you today. So all of you high school people, it could actually be interdisciplinary, but you worked in your content area, but there's lots of opportunities to make this interdisciplinary. So if you wouldn't mind, Matt, just giving us a brief overview with your driving question maybe, and then a little overview of your project.
Okay, well, Georgetown is in Brown County, which has been continually economically depressed for probably the last 15, 20 years, like a lot of rural areas are. And there's kind of a sense of hopelessness about that. And so my project focused on getting students to think about how do you economically develop a place like Georgetown. And so it requires them to work with, last year it was a single expert. Next year it's going to be a panel of about 8 experts that they can use and go through different iterations of this project, answering this question and what I call kind of peeling away the layers of the onion of exactly what are we going to do and what's going to be the cost to the community of doing these economic development projects. And so that's the basic goal of the project.
Okay. And do you have your driving question handy?
I remember it. It's how can we work together with our community to better economically develop the village of Georgetown? Okay. Is what it was.
Awesome. Okay, so if I remember correctly, isn't this a project that you did something similar to before you were PBL trained, or was this brand new?
This was brand new. It requires students to take a bunch of things that are talked about in general in what's a freshman in college CC, and take all of those citizenship participation skills and kind of put them to use in a project. So I had never done or approached anything like this before. Never met the village administrator in our area. Never met a bunch of the officials, and because of the project, I now know a bunch of different people in the area, and they've seen the results of this and are willing to want to do it again.
That's amazing. So the community connections was sort of an outcome of this that maybe you hadn't predicted would be as strong as it is.
Yes, the village administrator actually contacted me again in January, and the village was rewriting or attempting to be a charter community instead of being one without a charter. And so he wanted my students to come in and see that process, and was adamant that they be part of this. And so we gave our students that opportunity, even though the class had ended at the semester mark. It continued on after, and I'm sure it'll continue on this year.
Wow. It doesn't get much more authentic than that, does it?
No.
So talk to me a little bit about your kids and how you think PBL and learning this way impacted them.
It was a real struggle and a real challenge for our kids, even though you had all 17 and 18-year-old students that were freshmen in college. A lot of their learning had been in a traditional classroom setting. And so this just came as a shock to the system to them in terms of being able to look at each other's work, being able to diagnose what's going on. not having that teacher as the resident expert there. And I have to say, it was a shock to the system for me too, as a teacher. Old habits die hard, and in PBL, you just need to really realize that that first iteration of your project is going to be a learning experience, and the biggest chunk of learning is going to be what the teacher learns. And so I found with our students that it was hard for me to push them to really engage with the material and really have those success skills to be able to dig deeper and get more information because they didn't have a lot of background.
As it went on, did you see engagement increasing?
Yeah, it was amazing how much they were able to start diagnosing problems and start figuring out who can I contact to get a piece of information that I couldn't get before. They started using each other's experts, which is where I started to say this one expert business for a kid that's 17 or 18 doing kind of advanced political science work. I could see a kid that was a junior or senior in college doing the project that my kids were doing last year. They needed those experts across the panel, and that was their idea. So I mean, I saw that kind of blossom where they're like, hey, we need to talk to the county treasurer. She has this information about what do you do when a business goes bankrupt, because we found this property we can use. And they were asking and answering the questions.
That's awesome. So, they're asking questions that you as, teacher, and I found this when I was teaching, they were asking questions that were outside my realm of expertise.
Very
right?
much so.
And so it's great that the kids started to drive the learning, is what it sounds like to me.
They very much did. Sometimes it would take me doing probably more than I wanted to in terms of saying, okay, well, where can we dig for this information? But a lot of that, again, it depended on the student. And in our schools now, I really kind of lay this at the feet of testing. We get kids ready with a bunch of information that they're armed with to go and take an assessment at the end of the year. And this is an entirely different way of learning where they are asking their own questions and diagnosing them, and kids are at different comfort levels with that.
Right. Especially you're getting them in high school when they've sort of been trained in a different way.
Yes.
So hopefully at Georgetown, with our cohort that started, I know the third grade had a great project, fifth grade had a great project. As they come to you as freshmen and seniors, you'll have kids who are trained differently.
Right. And one of the things that it's an element of my project this year, as we're going through it, and I really don't know how it's going to work out, is I'm going to leave all the resources and all the materials in a catalog form from last year's students for this year's students to build upon. It won't be anything that they can use where it's been all kind of put together for them. But what I'm hoping is that this year's crew might be able to dig a little bit deeper, a little bit sooner than last year's crew. And so that's kind of the point. But again, I have no idea if that's a good idea or not, but that's that's what I'm doing.
But it sets up the idea in your classroom that you view students as experts, right? Because if you're offering them students' research, then that puts some validity on the research they're doing in turn.
It really does. And with this project, there are really endless possibilities in the community. And I think every student last year, and me for that matter, we just came away with this idea like, wow, there is a lot that, number one, is going on in this community. And number two, there is a lot that can be done. And so I can see students proposing a number of different projects where they think about what other students have done and maybe build upon it a little bit. So
now I remember a conversation you and I had when I was in Georgetown for a coaching visit, where you asked about milestones, and I think you were in process at the time.
Yes.
And you
Yeah, I was
started
in
to
a
see
panic
that
mode at the time.
you were in what?
I was in full on panic mode at the time. Let's be honest. I was like, oh, Jill, I do not know what to do at this moment.
Well, isn't
So
that how we all learn, right?
it is.
So, okay, so the milestones were sort of something that you were thinking, oh my gosh, now I mean, mid boat ride, you need to put your safety gear on, right? So if you
Right.
could talk a little bit about that and like what made you come to that conclusion and how you remedied it.
Again, it was the students. I asked them a lot of questions about what would make this process easier, what would make this process better. And very early on, I had some of my better students saying, we need more milestones so that we can get more feedback. And a lot of the feedback that students were getting initially was coming from me. And that's not real PBL. That's not the way this is supposed to work.
But isn't that a
And
hard habit to break?
it is. It's the hardest habit to break. And it's a design feature that you have to go back in and reflect and make fixes. So at the end of the project last year, I really focused on this idea of milestones. I think when you're new to PBL, one of the things that's a real challenge is to understand at what point do you implement some of these protocols that are out there, and when's it appropriate. And I think that we get so focused in on some of the research elements and some of the presentation elements and things like that, that we forget about we have to provide that constant stream of feedback. And so one of the big fixes is anything that a student is going to present this year, there's going to be feedback coming very early on from their fellow students. So working with those charrette protocols, with those tuning protocols, with the silent gallery walks, all of those are going to be designed into a very long and extended project that gives them more time to get feedback from these experts, so they have a little bit more real world kind of experience with this. And I think what I wasn't able to capture last year that we started getting to at the end of the project this year is that ability to really analyze and diagnose what each other are doing, and to be able to suggest good fixes for them in a meaningful and kind way.
Right. And I'm so, you stated that so eloquently, Matt. It's something that as a practitioner, I struggled with. You have to teach kids how to give feedback, how to receive feedback, and
Yes.
how to implement and revise and make changes. So I love the intentionality that you're working towards next year with that revision and protocols and milestones. And okay, here's where we are. Let's stop, reflect, rebuild. That it's so important, and I think you're going to reap benefits like beyond belief. Is my prediction.
Well, I hope so. I mean, you never can tell, but this form of teaching, if teachers are new to this process, I would liken it to if you're a brand new teacher and you never have immersed yourself in the world of data. Because of testing, I think a lot of teachers do that. But if you get new ones that are in this whole idea of how you do that process, becomes overwhelming really quickly. PBL can be that way, where this whole idea is overwhelming. But then once you just watch it in operation for a little bit, that moment comes where you say, aha, this is how this works. And it's not that hard. It just requires persistence. So hopefully we'll have some better results.
I love everything you just said is what we hope students go through too, right? This is
Yeah.
hard. And then they develop persistence. And then they say, wow, this is better. It's hard, but better.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. And I'm looking down here because I want to get the address. We're going to post your project on our project showcased for the people who are listening today, watching today. So they'll have a chance to look at that. It is at bit.ly PBLMatters _ projects.
It's
I
my
hope to
pleasure.
see you again, maybe someday in person, right?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot more to be done with PBL, and I can just see with as much flexibility as we need with instruction these days, I can see PBL being a major component of that. So I know we'll see each other again.
All right. Thank you so much.